My son and his wife sent me to a nursing home grad. I took the $12 million with me, and a secret was revealed.
The thing that killed my family wasn't a gun or a disease. It was a blue folder, slid gently across the dining table, paired with a perfect smile. My daughter-in-law's voice was sweet as honey, but it was delivering my life's verdict. It's ironic, just moments before, the morning had been a perfect, fragile lie. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I'd been up since 6, just like every day for the last 40 years. I made breakfast for the family. Sunny-side-up eggs for Daniel, just how he liked them since he was a boy. A fruit salad with Greek yogurt for Claire, his perfectly composed wife. And a glass of warm milk for Emma before I took her to school. It was a familiar routine, a sweet obligation that I embraced. I loved the feeling of being useful, of still being the center of this small family. Daniel came downstairs, still looking half asleep. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, more out of habit than affection. "Morning, Mom." He sat down, picking up the newspaper but not really reading it. Claire followed, a vision of corporate efficiency in her tailored dress, her hair in a professional bun, a faint scent of expensive perfume in the air. She smiled at me, a smile I now realize was the same one she gave her clients, polite, bright, but completely empty. The false peace shattered when Daniel suddenly put his fork down. The clatter was unnaturally loud in the quiet kitchen. Claire gave him a subtle nod, a silent command, then turned to me. And that's when the blue folder appeared. My hand, on its way to my teacup, froze in midair. A vague, unsettling feeling coiled in my stomach. I looked at the folder, then at them. Daniel was now intensely studying the wood grain on the table. Only Claire met my gaze, her eyes unwavering, holding a chilling certainty. "You should take a look, Mom," she said, her voice still gentle. My fingers felt stiff, clumsy. The paper inside was cool and slick to the touch. The first page was a glossy brochure for the Green Valley Senior Living Facility, filled with stock photos of smiling seniors playing chess and doing yoga. The flowery words danced before my eyes. "Enjoy your golden years. A friendly, upscale community. Total peace of mind for your family." My heart began to pound against my ribs. A cold dread ran down my spine. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a preparation. I flipped through the pages, trying to keep my breathing even. Details of service packages, monthly fees, floor plans. Everything had been meticulously researched. And then I reached the last page. A registration contract. My personal information, name, age, date of birth, was already filled in. And at the bottom, in the space for the guardian responsible party, was a signature that was painfully familiar. Daniel's signature. His handwriting, the way he looped his D slightly to the left, I'd seen it 1,000 times on birthday cards, on permission slips for school trips, on college applications. But today, that same handwriting was a knife, stabbing me straight in the heart, ending every illusion I had carefully built. The world around me went silent. I could no longer hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room, or the birds singing in the garden. All I could see was that signature, the irrefutable proof of betrayal. I slowly lifted my head. Claire was still smiling, a patient, triumphant smile. She knew she had won. Daniel finally glanced up at me just for a second. In his eyes, I didn't see malice. I saw something worse: weakness, shame, and guilt. He knew this was wrong, but he did it anyway. He had chosen his wife over his mother. "Just take your time to think about it," Claire said, her tone as condescending as a pat on the head. "The transport from the center will be here on Friday. We've arranged everything." That statement extinguished the last spark of hope. There was no room for choice. Everything had been decided. They stood up, clearing their plates as if nothing had happened, as if they had just been discussing a weekend trip. The sound of their footsteps faded as they went upstairs. I was left alone in the cold kitchen, with my eviction notice on the table. The sun was still shining brightly outside, but for me, it had just set forever. My mind, as a form of self-preservation, refused to process the future. Instead, it dragged me back in time, forcing me to rewatch the past through a new, brutally honest lens. I was being shown the evidence of a crime I never knew was being committed against me. Just a few months ago, I was living under the illusion of a happy family. My joy was simple. It was the smell of damp earth in my Oregon rose garden, the quiet pride in a perfectly baked apple pie, and most of all, the sound of my granddaughter Emma's laughter. She was the sun in my universe. Every afternoon, after picking her up from school, we had our little ritual. We'd sit on the old porch swing, and she'd whisper her 6-year-old secrets into my ear. "Grandma, Ben held my hand today," she'd giggle, her face turning bright pink. "It's a secret, okay?" I would nod solemnly, promising to take it to my grave. In those moments, I felt like the richest woman in the world. I thought I was the anchor of this family. I cooked Daniel's favorite meals, and the rare moments he'd look up from his phone and say, "This is good, Mom," were enough to fill my heart for a week. I told myself his silence was just the weight of his past business failures, that Claire's nitpicking was just her ambitious type A personality. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, again and again. I was wearing rose-colored glasses, refusing to see that the writing was on the wall. Now, looking back, I see the cracks I chose to ignore. I remember one chilly evening, I had the electric fireplace running in the living room. Claire walked in, held her hand out to feel the warmth, and then turned to me with that saccharine smile. "Mom, it's probably not good for seniors to be around dry heat so much. Besides, our utility bill has been through the roof lately." At the time, I felt a pang of guilt, as if I'd been caught being wasteful. I turned it off immediately. I see it now for what it was. Not a health concern, but a complaint about my cost. I was an expense on a spreadsheet. Then there was the kitchen incident. I was in the middle of preparing dinner, pots and pans on the counter. Claire walked in, her nose wrinkled in distaste. "I'm just so worried Emma will run in here and trip on something, Mom. We need to be more careful." My kitchen, my domain for 40 years, was suddenly a hazardous zone because of my carelessness. She made me feel like an incompetent housekeeper in my own home. But the deepest cut came from Daniel. He never criticized me, but his indifference was 1,000 times more painful. Dinners became a silent torture. I tried to start a conversation, talk about the old days, but he'd just give one-word answers, his eyes glued to the bright screen in his hand. He was building an invisible wall between us, and my love wasn't strong enough to break it down. I remember one dinner vividly. I'd made his favorite, pot roast, the way his father used to love it. I was telling a story about him as a little boy, how he'd tried to help me in the garden and ended up pulling out all my prize-winning tulips. I was laughing, hoping to see a spark of the old Daniel. He didn't even look up. He just grunted, scrolled through something on his phone, and showed it to Claire. They shared a private, silent laugh. In that moment, I was completely invisible, a ghost at my own dinner table. I felt a profound loneliness, a coldness that the pot roast couldn't warm. I excused myself from the table early that night, claiming I was tired. The truth was, I couldn't bear to sit there for another second, being treated like the furniture. My mind snaps back to the present. I'm still in the kitchen, the blue folder sitting on the table like a tombstone. These memories are no longer warm. They are exhibits in the case against them, puzzle pieces clicking into place to form a perfect picture of a long-planned betrayal. They didn't just decide to get rid of me overnight. They had been pushing me out inch by inch with every passive-aggressive comment, every cold shoulder, every calculated silence. The shock has faded, replaced by a cold, hard anger. They took my love for granted. They saw my sacrifice as an obligation. They saw my very existence as a burden to be managed. The illusion of a happy family is gone, shattered into a million pieces. And in its place, a single question echoes in the silence of my heart. Am I going to let them win? The human mind has a cruel way of replaying your worst moments. As I sat there, paralyzed in my kitchen, my memory wasn't done with me. It dragged me back one last time, to the moment that served as the final nail in the coffin. It was about a month ago, a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was walking down the hallway, planning to get a glass of iced tea, when I heard their voices coming from the kitchen, low, hushed, conspiratorial. I froze instinctively, my hand flat against the wall, becoming an unwilling spy in my own home. Claire's voice was first, sharp and pragmatic. It's not personal, Daniel, it's practical. We need the space. Emma is getting older. She needs a proper playroom, not a corner of the living room. And honestly, we can't be her full-time caregivers forever. What if she falls? What if she gets sick? There was a pause, and then Daniel's voice, full of a hesitation that twisted my gut. But she's my mom, Claire. She's perfectly healthy. Sending her to a home? It just feels wrong. It feels like we're abandoning her. Abandoning her? Claire scoffed, her voice dripping with condescension. We're putting her in a luxury facility with 24/7 medical staff and organized activities. That's the opposite of abandonment. That's being responsible. What's irresponsible is you and I being so stressed out that we can't focus on our careers or our own daughter. I could hear the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. Daniel must have been pacing. I know, but what will people say? What will she say? Who cares what people say? Claire shot back, her voice losing its patient facade. They aren't paying our mortgage. And as for your mother, we frame it as a gift, a way for her to be independent, safe, and social. We tell her we're doing it for her. It's a bitter pill to swallow, Daniel, but it has to be done for the good of our family, for Emma's future, for our future. Her words hung in the air, cold and sharp. She had an answer for everything. She had twisted this act of betrayal into an act of love. I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding in my ears, waiting for my son to defend me. I prayed he would stand up to her, that he would remember he was my son before he was her husband. There was a long, agonizing silence. It stretched for what felt like an eternity. I held my breath, listening for his rebuttal, for his anger, for anything. And then it came. His voice, so quiet it was almost a whisper, defeated and hollow. Okay, you're right. Just 3 words. 3 words that shattered what was left of my heart. He didn't just agree. He validated her entire cruel logic. Okay, he repeated, a little louder, as if trying to convince himself. We'll do it. You handle the arrangements. The silence that followed was worse than the words. It was the sound of my son giving up on me. It was the sound of my place in this family being erased. I didn't wait to hear more. I backed away from the doorway as silently as I had approached, my hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. I retreated to my room and cried until there were no tears left. The memory fades, leaving an icy calm in its wake. I'm back in the present, sitting at the kitchen table. The ghost of that conversation still hangs in the air, but something inside me has shifted. The shock has burned away. The grief has been cauterized. The tears are gone for good. In their place, a different feeling has taken root. It's not sadness. It's a cold, crystalline clarity, a focus I haven't felt in years. I finally see them for who they are. I see the game they were playing, and I know, with absolute certainty, that I will not be a pawn in it. They thought they were writing me off. They thought they had all the power. They underestimated the woman who raised a son, managed a household, and balanced the books for a major company for 30 years. They mistook my love for weakness. A slow, determined smile touches my lips for the first time that day. It's not a happy smile. It's the smile of a queen who has just been checkmated, only to realize she has a hidden army waiting to move. I look at the blue folder on the table. It's not an eviction notice anymore. It's a declaration of war. And I have every intention of winning. Sleep didn't come that night. It wasn't the tossing and turning of a worried mind. It was the focused stillness of a general planning a campaign. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape of cold, hard resolve. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, not seeing the shadows, but seeing a chessboard. For years, I had played defense, reacting to their moves, absorbing their subtle aggressions. Tonight, I was switching sides. I was going on the offensive. When the first light of dawn filtered through my window, my decision was set in stone. The grief was gone. The hurt was packed away. In its place was a singular purpose. I got out of bed, showered, and dressed with a precision I hadn't felt in years. Every action was deliberate. There was no room for hesitation. This was the point of no return. Downstairs, the house was quiet. I made myself a cup of black coffee, skipping the cream and sugar. I needed the bitterness to match the taste in my mouth. I sat at the kitchen table, the scene of yesterday's execution, but today it felt different. It was my war room. I opened my old address book, its pages worn and soft from years of use, and found the number I was looking for. Paul Sterling, my husband's lawyer, and mine for the last 30 years. A good, cautious man who had guided me through wills and investments with a steady hand. He was about to see a side of me he never knew existed. My hand was perfectly steady as I dialed his office number. His assistant answered on the second ring. "Sterling and Associates, how can I help you?" "This is Margaret Hawthorne. I need to speak with Paul, please. It's urgent." My voice was calm, level, devoid of the emotion that had racked me just hours before. There was a brief pause. "Of course, Mrs. Hawthorne. Please hold." A moment later, Paul's familiar, warm voice came on the line. "Margaret? Is everything all right? It's early for you." "Everything is fine, Paul. Better than fine, in fact. I need to see you. Today." "Today?" I could hear the surprise in his voice. "My schedule is packed, Margaret. Can it wait until tomorrow?" "No," I said, the single word carrying a weight that allowed no argument. "It cannot. Cancel whatever you need to cancel. This is the most important financial decision of my life." The line went silent for a beat. Paul knew me. He knew I wasn't prone to drama or exaggeration. He must have sensed the steel in my voice. "All right," he said, his tone shifting to a professional concern. "I have a lunch meeting I can move. Can you be at my office at noon?" "I'll be there." "Can you tell me what this is about so I can prepare?" I took a sip of my coffee. "I'm restructuring my entire estate. I want to set up an irrevocable trust." The silence on the other end was longer this time. An irrevocable trust was the nuclear option of estate planning. It meant once the assets were in, Not even I could get them out. It was a fortress with no back door. Margaret, that's a very serious step, Paul said slowly, choosing his words carefully. That's permanent. Once you do it, there's no going back. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Is there something going on you need to tell me about? I looked at the blue folder, which I had placed neatly on the counter. It was my reminder, my fuel. I have never been more sure of anything in my entire life, I said, my voice as cold and clear as a winter morning. I want everything in it, Paul. The house, the brokerage accounts, the savings, the full 12 million, every last cent. And the beneficiary? He asked, his voice now just a whisper of professional duty. My granddaughter, Emma Hawthorne, to be disbursed to her upon her 21st birthday. No one else is to have access. Not Daniel, not his wife. No one. I see, he said, though I knew he didn't. Not yet. We will discuss the details at noon, Margaret. There is one more thing, Paul, I added, my voice dropping slightly. This meeting, and everything we are about to do, is to be kept in the strictest confidence. Do you understand? Of course, Margaret. Attorney-client privilege is absolute. This goes beyond that, I clarified. This is a private matter. No one is to know until I decide they should. Understood, he said. We ended the call. I placed the phone down and finished my coffee. The first move had been made. The pieces were in motion. They had started this war, but I was going to be the one to finish it. Friday morning arrived not with dread, but with a quiet, electric hum of purpose. This was not an ending. It was an inauguration. I woke before my alarm. The plan I had forged in the sleepless night, now a solid structure in my mind. There was no more anger, no more grief. There was only the task at hand. I bypassed my closet full of clothes, the relics of a life that was no longer mine. Instead, I pulled out a single sturdy suitcase. My packing was methodical, a strategic selection of my new life's essentials. I packed 3 sets of simple, comfortable clothes, a good pair of walking shoes, and my reading glasses. I took the silver frame photo from my nightstand, one of my late husband, his arm around a 5-year-old Emma, both of them beaming. They were my past and my future, the 2 anchors of my love. Then I packed my checkbook, my passport, and the newly drafted documents from Paul Sterling. And at the very top, I placed the blue folder, my declaration of war. It would serve as a constant reminder of why I was doing this. 1 suitcase. That was it. 68 years of life distilled into a single piece of luggage. It felt liberating. With my bag packed and waiting by the door, I walked into my garden for the last time. The Oregon air was cool and damp, carrying the rich, earthy scent of the soil I had tended for decades. I didn't wander aimlessly. I walked with the focused eye of an inspector. I touched the velvety petal of a Mr. Lincoln rose, its deep red a testament to its resilience. I noted the thorns, sharp and unapologetic, guarding the delicate bloom. For years, I had pruned this garden, cutting away dead wood to make room for new growth. I understood the principle perfectly. Sometimes, to save the whole, you have to be ruthless with the parts that are rotting. I saw Daniel and Claire through the kitchen window, moving around, drinking coffee, blissfully unaware of the tectonic shift that had occurred within me. They saw an old woman, a problem to be managed. They had no idea they were looking at their own downfall. I felt no bitterness, only a profound, almost surgical detachment. At precisely 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I didn't wait for them to answer it. I walked to the door, my back straight, my head held high. Daniel stood there, looking uncomfortable in his own skin. He couldn't quite meet my eyes. Are you Are you ready, Mom? He stammered, his gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder. I've been ready all morning, Daniel, I replied, my voice even and calm. It seemed to unnerve him more than any tears or accusations could have. He reached for my suitcase. Is this it? Just one bag? It's all I need, I said simply. The car ride was silent, but it was a silence charged with unspoken words. Daniel kept fidgeting with the radio, unable to find a station, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I, on the other hand, sat perfectly still, looking out the window. The familiar landscape of our small Oregon town rolled by, but I saw it with new eyes. I saw the towering Douglas firs, symbols of endurance. I saw the steady flow of the Willamette River, a force that could not be stopped. I felt a kinship with them. I glanced at my son. I didn't see the little boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee. I saw a weak man, a man so terrified of his wife and his own failures that he would sacrifice his own mother to find a moment's peace. I didn't hate him. In that moment, I pitied him. He was a prisoner in his own life, and he didn't even know it. He thought he was driving me to a place where I would slowly fade away, a quiet end to a long life. He had no idea he was my chauffeur, delivering me to the front lines of my new beginning. He was a pawn, moving his mother off the board, thinking he had cleared the way for his queen. He couldn't see that the old woman in the passenger seat had just become a queen herself. As we pulled into the long, manicured driveway of the Green Valley Senior Living Facility, he finally spoke, his voice thick with a guilt he couldn't hide. It's really nice here, Mom. They have a great activity schedule. I turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time that morning. I gave him a small, serene smile. Don't worry about me, Daniel, I said, my voice soft but firm. I'm going to be just fine. He thought he was delivering a prisoner to her cell. He had no idea he was dropping off a general at her new command post. The war had just begun. Daniel and Claire had pictured this place as a waiting room for the end. A clean, sterile, respectable place where their problem, me, would be quietly managed until I was no longer a problem at all. They saw it as a prison of polite decay. They couldn't have been more wrong. For me, Green Valley wasn't an ending. It was an escape. The first thing I did was refuse the standard room they had assigned me. I requested a tour of the available suites, my voice calm and firm, much to the surprise of the young administrator. I chose a corner unit on the top floor, one with a small balcony and a view that overlooked the rolling Oregon hills, not the parking lot. I paid the upgraded fee for the first 6 months right there on the spot, with my own check. The administrator's eyes widened slightly. This wasn't the typical, tearful admission she was used to. I unpacked my single suitcase with purpose. I hung my few clothes in the closet, arranged my toiletries in the bathroom, and placed the silver-framed photo of my husband and Emma on the nightstand. It was my anchor. Then, I sat down and opened the blue folder. I didn't read the contract again. I simply looked at it, letting the cold fury it ignited solidify into a shield around my heart. This was not my shame. This was my motivation. For the first 2 days, I explored. I walked the halls not as a resident, but as a general surveying her new territory. I learned the staff's names. I memorized the schedule of activities. And on the 3rd day, I found the library. It was a quiet, sunlit room, smelling of old paper and lemon polish. And that's where I met Eleanor. She was sitting in a worn leather armchair, a copy of a dense political history book in her lap. She was probably in her late 70s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. As I browsed the shelves, she spoke without looking up. If you're looking for something to pass the time, the romance novels are on the bottom shelf. If you're looking for something to start a fight, try the political science section. I was taken aback by her directness. I smiled. And what if I'm just looking for a good story? She finally looked up, her eyes appraising me. Then you're in the right place. Every book in here is a good story. The question is, are you a good reader? That was the beginning of our friendship. Eleanor was a retired history professor from Reed College. She was sharp as a tack, cynical, and had absolutely no time for nonsense. She called a spade, and her blunt honesty was a breath of fresh air after years of navigating Claire's passive aggression and Daniel's evasions. We became thick as thieves almost overnight. My days took on a new rhythm, one of my own making. I joined a gentle yoga class in the mornings, not for my health, but for the quiet satisfaction of stretching my own limits. I joined Eleanor's book club, where we argued passionately about character motivations and plot holes. We weren't just passing time, we were engaging our minds. One afternoon, we were sitting on my balcony, a small pot with a new rose seedling between us. We were discussing the book of the week, a novel about a woman who gives up everything for her family. "It's nonsense," Eleanor declared, waving her hand dismissively. "This glorification of female sacrifice. We're taught that our value is measured by how much of ourselves we can give away. We spend our lives pouring ourselves into our husbands, our children, our homes, until there's nothing left in the pitcher for us." Her words struck me with the force of a physical blow. That was it. That was my entire life, summed up in one brutal metaphor. I had been pouring and pouring, believing that my purpose was to keep everyone else's cup full, never realizing my own was running dry. I had raised Daniel, supported my husband, kept a perfect home, managed my finances flawlessly, all in service of others. And what had it gotten me? A one-way ticket to this place, delivered by the very people I had given everything to. I looked out at the green hills, the vast Oregon sky stretching out before me. For 68 years, I had lived to please others. I had been a daughter, a wife, a mother, a grandmother. The title Margaret had always come second. "You're right, Eleanor," I said, my voice quiet but firm with a newfound conviction. "There's nothing left in the pitcher." I looked at her, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "Which means it's the perfect time to find a new spring to fill it from." In that moment, I felt a profound shift inside me. The last vestiges of the grieving mother fell away, replaced by the woman I was always meant to be. I was no longer a victim of my children's betrayal. I was the architect of my own life. They thought they had exiled me to a prison. They had no idea they had just handed me the key to my own freedom. A month passed. It was a month of quiet reconstruction, of finding my own rhythm. My days were filled with books, yoga, and long, invigorating conversations with Eleanor. For the first time in decades, my life was my own, and the peace I felt was profound. And then they showed up. I was in the sunlit library with Eleanor, deep in a debate about the merits of a historical biography, when one of the staff members approached me. "Mrs. Hawthorne, you have visitors. Your son and his wife are in the main lounge." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "The vultures have landed," she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear. I gave her a small, appreciative smile. I walked to the lounge, my steps unhurried. They were sitting on an uncomfortable-looking sofa, looking completely out of place amongst the cheerful floral decor. They looked terrible. Daniel had dark circles under his eyes, and his expensive polo shirt was wrinkled. Claire's makeup was flawless as always, but it couldn't hide the tight, anxious lines around her mouth. They looked like people who weren't sleeping, people who were being haunted by numbers on a balance sheet. "Good." "Mom," Daniel said, standing up too quickly. "You look great." "I feel great, Daniel," I replied, my voice neutral. I didn't invite them to my room. I sat in an armchair opposite them, creating a deliberate distance. Claire launched into a flurry of fake pleasantries. "This place is just lovely, Mom. We're so glad you're settling in well. The gardens are beautiful." "They are," I agreed, offering nothing more. The small talk died a quick, awkward death. They exchanged a look, a silent signal passing between them. It was time for Act 2, the sob story. "It's been a tough month, honestly," Claire began, sighing dramatically. She reached out and put a hand on Daniel's knee. "That real estate investment we were so excited about, it just went south. The market is so unpredictable right now. We were completely blindsided." "It's been a lot of stress," Daniel mumbled, staring at his hands. "A real nightmare." I listened, my expression unchanged. I felt nothing. No sympathy, no pity. It was like watching a poorly acted play. I knew this wasn't a casual complaint. It was the opening move in a chess game. They were laying the groundwork, trying to elicit the maternal pity that had been their go-to weapon for years. But that well had run dry. "That's a shame," I said simply. The two words were so devoid of emotion that they seemed to hang in the air between us, cold and hard. Claire's smile tightened. This wasn't going according to plan. She decided to be a little more direct. "We're just trying to figure out how to get back on our feet. It set us back years, financially. We've been looking at our finances, trying to make a plan for the future. You know?" I knew exactly what she meant. Our future, your finances. She was talking about my money. I took a slow sip of the water on the table beside me. I let the silence stretch, forcing them to sit in their own discomfort. I could see Daniel fidgeting, his leg bouncing up and down. Claire's mask of concern was beginning to crack, revealing the raw desperation underneath. "Well," I said finally, placing my glass down with a soft click. "Financial planning is very important. I'm glad to hear you're taking it seriously." It was a verbal dead end, and she knew it. She looked at Daniel, her eyes flashing with frustration, urging him to step in. He cleared his throat. "Mom, what Claire is trying to say is, we were hoping maybe you could help us out, just this once, alone, to help us recover. We're your family." There it was, the direct ask, the culmination of their little performance, the son appealing to the mother's love. A few months ago, it would have worked. I would have felt his stress as my own, his debt as my responsibility. I would have written a check without a second thought. But I wasn't that woman anymore. That woman had died in the kitchen, staring at his signature on a piece of paper. I looked at him, my son, a man in his 40s, asking his mother to bail him out of a mess of his own making. The love I once felt for him was still there, a dull ache deep inside. But it was now encased in a thick, impenetrable layer of ice. It was the love one feels for a memory, not for the person sitting in front of you. "Daniel," I said, my voice soft but unyielding. "My financial situation is very structured now. Everything has been arranged." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I gave them nothing. I simply stated a fact. The hope drained from their faces, replaced by a stunned disbelief. They had come here expecting a fight, or tears, or an easy surrender. They were not prepared for this calm, immovable wall. They had come to pull the strings of their puppet, only to find the strings had been cut. They left soon after that, their excuses hasty and clumsy. As I watched them walk away, their shoulders slumped in defeat, I didn't feel a shred of victory. I only felt a cold, quiet confirmation. I had done the right thing. The betrayal had been a poison, but it had also been an antidote. It had cured me of a lifetime of selfless, unappreciated love. They didn't wait long. A week later, my phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice was strained, attempting a casualness that he couldn't pull off. He wanted to visit again, just him and Claire. He said they needed to talk. I knew exactly what that meant. The gloves were off. This wasn't going to be a reconnaissance mission like last time. This was going to be the final assault. "Of course, Daniel," I said, my voice calm. "I'll be in the library at 3. I chose the library deliberately. It was public, yet intimate. It was my territory now, a place of quiet strength. I sat in my usual armchair, a book open on my lap. Though I wasn't reading, I was preparing. When they walked in, the change in their demeanor was palpable. The fake smiles were gone. Claire's face was a mask of cold determination. Daniel looked like a man walking to his own execution. He was pale, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. He pulled a chair up, sitting too close, invading my personal space. Claire stood behind him like a silent enforcer. "Mom," he began, his voice low and urgent. "We need to be honest with each other. We're in trouble. Real trouble." I simply looked at him, waiting. That investment, it wasn't just a loss. It was a catastrophe. We're on the verge of losing everything, Mom. The house, the cars, everything we've worked for. He leaned forward, his eyes pleading. He was pulling out all the stops, trying to tug at the maternal heartstrings he thought still controlled me. "Remember when I was a kid? When I broke Mr. Henderson's window with a baseball? You didn't yell. You just came with me, held my hand, and helped me apologize. You always fixed things. You always made things right." The memory, meant to soften me, had the opposite effect. It was a reminder of a lifetime of me cleaning up his messes. I had fixed the broken window, paid for his first car when he crashed it, and bailed out his first failed business venture. The bank of Mom had always been open. Now, he was expecting one last massive withdrawal. "I'm listening, Daniel," was all I said. My calmness seemed to agitate him. His desperation began to fray at the edges. "Listening isn't enough. We need your help. We're not asking for a handout, just a loan, a bridge to get us through this. You have the money, Mom. You have more than enough. It's just sitting there." His voice was rising, cracking with a sense of entitlement. He saw my $12 million not as my life savings, my security, but as a resource he was owed. "That money has been allocated, Daniel," I said, my voice as steady as a rock. "Allocated to what?" he demanded, throwing his hands up in frustration. "To a trust for Emma that she can't even touch for 15 years? That doesn't help anyone right now. It doesn't help me, your son." He stood up then, pacing in front of me, the cornered animal finally lashing out. "I am your son, Mom. Your only child. Everything you have should be mine eventually anyway. What's the point of letting us drown now when you could save us? Don't you love me at all?" There it was, the final desperate card to play. The emotional blackmail. He was weaponizing my love for him. I slowly closed the book on my lap. I placed it carefully on the small table beside me. I looked up, not at the desperate, flailing man in front of me, but deep into his eyes, searching for the boy I once knew. He was gone. In his place was a stranger, twisted by greed and weakness. I finally spoke, and my voice was not loud, not angry, but it cut through the air with the finality of a judge's gavel. "It is precisely because I love you, Daniel, that my answer is no." The word hung between us. No. He stopped pacing. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open, as if he couldn't process what he had just heard. He had hit a brick wall. My entire life, I continued, my voice quiet but carrying an immense weight. I have helped you. I fixed your mistakes. I paid for your failures. I enabled your weakness. And look where it has led you, to this. A man who would throw his own mother out of her home for money. Helping you now wouldn't be an act of love. It would be the final act of my failure as a parent. I stood up, my small stature suddenly feeling powerful. The bank is closed, Daniel. Permanently. You and your wife created this mess. You will find your own way out of it. The disbelief on their faces curdled into raw, ugly fury. Claire's mask finally shattered, revealing a snarl. Daniel's face was a mess of shock and rage. They had come for a negotiation and had been met with a declaration of independence. They left without another word, slamming the library door behind them. The sound echoed in the quiet room. It was the sound of the final nail in the coffin of our old relationship. It was the sound of a steel door, slamming shut forever. I stood there for a long moment, the silence settling around me. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel triumph. I felt free, utterly and completely free. For 2 weeks, there was silence, a tense, unnerving quiet that felt less like peace and more like the calm before a hurricane. I thought my final no had been the end of it. I thought they would retreat, lick their wounds, and be forced to deal with their own problems. I was naive. I had cut off their supply line, so they decided to come after my soul. The attack didn't come with a phone call or a visit. It came in a crisp manila envelope delivered by courier. It was from my lawyer, Paul. I opened it, expecting some routine paperwork. Instead, I found a copy of a legal petition filed with the Oregon Family Court. My hands started to shake as I read the words. Daniel and Claire were petitioning the court for an emergency order to restrict my visitation rights with Emma. The grounds were listed in cold legal jargon: mental and emotional instability, erratic behavior, and potential endangerment to a minor. They were using my decision to move into this facility, a decision they forced upon me, as proof that I was unstable. They were twisting my act of self-preservation into a weapon to be used against me. It was a punch to the gut, so vicious and unexpected it knocked the wind out of me. They weren't just after my money anymore. They were trying to sever the one connection that gave my life meaning. They were trying to take Emma. I stood up, my head spinning. A wave of dizziness washed over me, so intense that the room tilted violently. The edges of my vision turned dark. I reached out for the table to steady myself, but my hand missed. The floor rushed up to meet me. I remember a sharp pain in my hip, the sound of a lamp crashing, and then, for a moment, nothing. I woke up in the facility's infirmary. A doctor was shining a light in my eyes. Eleanor was by my side, her face etched with worry. "You gave us quite a scare, Margaret," she said, her voice tight. "The doctor said it was a TIA, a mini-stroke." The words barely registered. All I could think about was the petition, the legal papers, Emma. A few days later, Paul came to see me. I was back in my room, feeling physically weak but mentally on high alert. He sat across from me, his expression grim. "It's worse than we thought, Margaret," he said, getting straight to the point. "Claire subpoenaed your medical records from the incident. She has the doctor's report confirming the TIA." I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. "What does that mean, Paul?" "It means she's going to use it in court," he said, his voice heavy. "She's going to stand up in front of a judge and argue that you are not only emotionally unstable, but now physically frail and a medical risk to your own granddaughter. She's painting a picture of a confused, sick old woman who can't be trusted. It's a low blow, Margaret. A very, very low blow." To add insult to injury, Eleanor showed me her tablet that evening. Claire had launched a full-blown smear campaign. A local community Facebook group was filled with anonymous posts, all telling the same story. A wealthy, selfish grandmother who had abandoned her struggling son and his family, now trying to interfere with their child's life out of spite. They were twisting the narrative, making me the villain in a story where I was the victim. They were poisoning the well, turning public opinion against me before I even had a chance to speak. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. They had attacked my finances, my home, my reputation, and now, my health. They had me backed into a corner. They weren't just trying to win. They were trying to annihilate me. For a fleeting moment, despair washed over me. The fight seemed impossible. They were young, ruthless, and willing to do anything. I was just a 68-year-old woman recovering from a stroke, fighting for the right to see the one person I loved most in the world. But then, I looked at the photo on my nightstand. Emma's bright, innocent smile. The love in that picture was the one truth in a world of lies. It was my North Star. The despair receded, replaced by a familiar cold fire. This was no longer a battle over a will or a bank account. This was a war for my legacy. It was a war for Emma's right to know her grandmother, to know a love that was unconditional and pure. "They've hit below the belt, Paul," I said to him over the phone later that night, my voice steady and hard. "They think they've won." "What are you going to do, Margaret?" he asked. I looked at Emma's smiling face. "I'm going to fight," I said. "And I am not going to lose." The court date was looming, a dark cloud on the horizon. My days were a blur of meetings with Paul, preparing statements, and trying to build a defense against my own son. The stress was immense, a constant, heavy pressure on my chest. I was fighting a war on two fronts, a legal battle for Emma and a personal battle against my own failing health. There were days I felt like I was running on fumes, that I didn't have the strength to see it through. It was on one of those dark afternoons, as I was sitting in my room feeling utterly defeated, that Paul called. His voice was different. It lacked its usual cautious, lawyerly tone. There was an electric current of something else in it, something that sounded suspiciously like satisfaction. "Margaret," he said, "I have some news. I thought you might want to hear it." "If it's another legal motion from Claire, Paul, I don't think I can take it today," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "No, Margaret. This isn't from them. This is from me." I sat up a little straighter. "What is it?" "Do you remember the plan we put in place? The one regarding the house?" he asked, a hint of a smile in his voice. "Well, the final notice went out this morning, and I was confused for a moment, my mind so focused on the custody battle that I had almost forgotten the other pieces on the chessboard. The house. My house. The auction notice," Paul clarified. "It was delivered to Daniel and Claire's address about an hour ago via certified mail. They now have official legal notification that the property at 125 Rosewood Lane will be sold at public auction in 90 days. The proceeds, as per the irrevocable trust, will be deposited directly into Emma's fund." I was silent. I pictured the scene in my mind. Claire, in the middle of her legal scheming, confident she had me on the ropes. Daniel, wallowing in his self-pity. And then the mail arrives. A crisp official envelope that changes everything. An eviction notice, delivered not with a folder on a kitchen table, but with the full, unassailable force of the law. It was poetic justice. It was karma, delivered by the U.S. Postal Service. "They're in the middle of trying to prove I'm unstable and a danger to my grandchild," I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. "And they're about to be homeless." "That's the gist of it," Paul confirmed, no longer hiding his satisfaction. They thought they were playing chess, but they were playing checkers. While they were busy making small, nasty moves, you were setting up the checkmate. A wave of something that felt dangerously like hope washed over me. It wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about taking back control. It was about reminding them that I was not a helpless old woman to be pushed aside. I was Margaret Hawthorne. I had built a life from nothing, and I would not let them tear it down without a fight. This changes things, doesn't it, Paul? I asked. It complicates their lives enormously, he said. It pulls the rug out from under them financially at the worst possible moment. They'll be distracted, panicked. It might make them more desperate, or it might make them rethink this whole ugly custody battle. Either way, it puts them on the defensive. We ended the call, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a lightness in my chest. The weight of their attacks had been suffocating, but now I had fired back. The first real shot of the war had been mine, and it had hit its target perfectly. The news didn't bring me joy. There is no joy in watching your own child's world crumble, even when he is the architect of his own destruction. It brought something else, something more potent, a sense of equilibrium. The scales of justice, which had been tipped so heavily against me, were beginning to swing back. I walked over to my balcony and looked out at the setting sun. The Oregon sky was painted in shades of orange and deep purple. The world was still beautiful. I felt a profound sadness, a deep, aching grief for the family I thought I had, for the son I thought I raised. That family was gone forever. But as I stood there, watching the last sliver of sun dip below the hills, I wasn't filled with despair. I was filled with a quiet, steely strength. The battle for Emma was far from over, but now I knew I had the power to win it. The house of cards they had built was starting to fall. The auction notice was a grenade I had rolled into their lives, and I spent the next few days waiting for the explosion. I knew they wouldn't take it lying down. Claire was a fighter, and Daniel, now backed into a corner, was unpredictable. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, expecting another legal maneuver, another desperate plea. I never expected the news to come from the local TV station. I was in the common room with Eleanor, half watching the evening news, when a familiar face flashed on the screen. It was Daniel. But he wasn't in a suit. He was in a grainy booking photo, his eyes wide with shock and fear. The headline read, "Local real estate agent arrested in bank fraud scheme." My teacup clattered against its saucer. Eleanor grabbed my arm. "Margaret, is that?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my eyes glued to the screen. The reporter explained that Daniel Hawthorne had been arrested earlier that day for attempting to secure a six-figure business loan using a property as collateral that he no longer had the legal right to control. He had used the deeds to my house, the house that was now publicly listed for auction. He had walked into the bank and committed a felony out of sheer blind panic. He had been caught red-handed. The story was over in less than a minute. The news moved on to sports, but I was still frozen, staring at the screen. My son, a common criminal. The shame was a physical blow, but beneath it was a cold, terrifying sense of inevitability. This was the logical conclusion. This is what happens when you push a weak man to the end of his rope. He doesn't fight. He just grabs onto anything he can, even if it's illegal. The call came later that night. The phone in my room rang, its shrill sound cutting through the silence. I looked at the caller ID. Unknown number. My heart began to pound. I knew who it was. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, my hand trembling slightly as I picked up the receiver. "Hello?" An automated, metallic voice answered. "You have a collect call from an inmate at the Clackamas County Jail. To accept the charges, press 1. The world seemed to stop. This was it. The ultimate test. The boy I had raised, the child I had rocked to sleep, was on the other end of this line, calling me from a place of desperation and disgrace. Every maternal instinct I had ever possessed screamed at me to press the button, but the memory of his signature on that blue folder screamed just as loudly. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and pressed one. A click, a burst of static, and then his voice. It was a sound I barely recognized. It was shattered, raw, and choked with sobs. Mom, is that you? Please. I'm here, Daniel, I said, my own voice a stranger to my ears, impossibly calm, impossibly distant. Mom, you have to help me, he wept, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. They arrested me. Claire won't answer her phone. Her lawyer won't take my calls. I'm all alone in here. You have to get me out, please. He told me the bail amount. It was a staggering sum, but well within my means. A single check could have him home by morning. I know I messed up, Mom, he cried, his voice breaking completely. I know I did everything wrong. I was so scared. About the house, the money. I wasn't thinking. But please, Mom, don't leave me in here. It's cold and I'm scared. Please, just this one last time. I'll pay you back, I swear. I'll do anything. I listened in silence to my 40-year-old son crying like a lost child. A part of me, the mother part, wanted to soothe him, to tell him everything would be okay, to fix this like I had fixed everything else. But another, newer part of me, the part that had been forged in the fire of his betrayal, knew that fixing it was what had led us here in the first place. Helping him now would be like giving a drink to a drunk. It would solve the immediate problem, but guarantee a worse one down the road. He was my son. But was I still his mother? Or was I just his last resort? Was this a plea for forgiveness? Or just a plea for my bank account? The silence stretched on, filled only by the sound of his ragged breathing. He was waiting for my answer. The world was waiting for my answer. Daniel, I said finally, my voice clear and steady, cutting through his sobs. Listen to me. He quieted, sniffing. Yes, Mom. I am not going to bail you out. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. A sound of pure, unadulterated shock. But, I continued, before he could fall apart again, I will call Paul first thing in the morning. You need a criminal defense attorney, not a get-out-of-jail-free card. You will face the consequences of your actions, but you will not face them alone. I hung up the phone before he could reply. I stood there, my hand resting on the receiver, my body shaking. I had refused to save my son. Or maybe, just maybe, I had finally taken the first real step toward actually doing so. The visiting room of the county jail smelled of disinfectant and quiet desperation. A thick pane of plexiglass separated me from my son. This wasn't the place I had ever imagined seeing him. But here we were. He sat slumped on the stool opposite me, wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit that seemed to swallow his defeated frame. The arrogant, entitled man from the library was gone. In his place was a hollowed-out shell, his eyes vacant and haunted. We sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the crackle of the phone receiver I held to my ear. He didn't ask for money. He didn't plead or bargain. He just stared at his hands, cuffed on the table in front of him. I lost everything, Mom, he finally whispered, his voice raspy. Not just the house, everything. I waited, saying nothing. This wasn't a confession I could prompt. It had to come from him. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he continued, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. I had a business. It was small, but it was mine. I was proud of it. He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with a pain so profound it was almost physical. And then I met Claire. And then I met Victor. Victor. The name was unfamiliar, a new piece in a puzzle I was only just beginning to understand. Victor was Claire's business mentor, Daniel said, the words dripping with a bitterness I'd never heard from him before. He was older, successful, charismatic. He took me under his wing. He gave me advice, introduced me to investors. Claire pushed me to trust him completely. She said he was our ticket to the big leagues. He let out a short, harsh laugh that sounded more like a sob. I was so stupid. I was so desperate to prove myself, to make you proud, to make her proud. I followed his advice to the letter. I took out loans. I signed contracts he recommended. And one by one, everything started to go wrong. A key supplier backed out. A major contract was suddenly canceled. My credit line was frozen. He leaned forward, his forehead almost touching the glass. I thought it was just bad luck. I thought I was a failure. I worked myself to the bone, trying to plug the holes in a sinking ship. And all the while, Claire was right there, telling me how unlucky we were, how I needed to rely on her more. She made me feel small, dependent. She broke me down, piece by piece, until I believed I was nothing without her. The pieces started clicking into place in my mind, forming a picture far more sinister than I could have imagined. This wasn't just greed. This was a long con. The day my business officially went bankrupt, he said, his voice barely audible, Victor bought it for pennies on the dollar through a shell corporation, and Claire got a finder's fee that was more than I had made in 3 years. The air left my lungs. It was a calculated, methodical destruction. They hadn't just taken advantage of his failure. They had engineered it. Why, Daniel? I whispered into the phone. Why would she do that? Because she didn't want a partner, he said, looking at me with heartbreaking clarity. She wanted a puppet. She needed me weak, broken, and completely dependent on her. So when the time came to go after your money, I would do whatever she said. She knew I was too ashamed to ever admit to you that I had failed again. She isolated me, controlled me, and I let her. He finally broke down completely, his shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. He wasn't making excuses. He was laying the ugly, painful truth bare. He had been a fool, a willing participant in his own downfall, but he had also been a victim of a ruthless predator who wore the face of his wife. I looked at my son, the man in the orange jumpsuit, and the cold fury I had harbored against him for months began to shift. It didn't disappear. It simply changed its target. It morphed into a laser-focused, white-hot rage directed at the two people who had done this to him. To us. My hand, which had been clenched in a fist, slowly relaxed. I raised it and placed my palm flat against the cold plexiglass, as if I could somehow reach through and touch him. He looked up, saw my hand, and mirrored the gesture, placing his own cuffed hand against the glass opposite mine. For the first time in years, we were connected. I believe you, Daniel, I said, my voice firm and clear. He closed his eyes, relief washing over his face. Now, I continued, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. Tell me everything you know about Victor. The war wasn't over. It had just found its true enemy. I walked out of that jail and into the Oregon afternoon sun a different woman. The grieving mother was gone. The victim was gone. In their place was a woman fueled by a righteous, glacial fury. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was going on the hunt. My first call was to Paul. I didn't wait to get back to my room. I stood on the sidewalk, the sounds of the city buzzing around me, and laid it all out. It was a setup, Paul. I said, my voice low and hard. A long con. Claire and a business partner named Victor engineered Daniel's bankruptcy years ago. They broke him down to control him, all to get to my money. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Are you certain, Margaret? I heard it from the horse's mouth, I said. Daniel told me everything. He's a fool, but he's our fool, and he's the key. His testimony can burn them to the ground. This changes everything, Paul said, his voice now matching my intensity. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. This is criminal. I know, I said, and we're going to use it. I'm done playing defense. The gloves are off. I want you to find out everything you can about this Victor. I want to know where he eats, sleeps, and breathes. And I want you to arrange a meeting with the district attorney's office. We're not just winning a custody battle anymore. We're taking them down. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of calculated aggression. Paul, invigorated by this new fight, was a bulldog. He hired a private investigator who dug into Victor's life. It turned out Victor had a history of shady business deals, leaving a trail of ruined partners in his wake. He was a professional predator. Meanwhile, I played my part. I had Paul leak a piece of information to a trusted source, knowing it would get back to Claire. That Daniel, racked with guilt, was considering a full confession to the authorities in exchange for a plea deal. We were rattling the cage, and we knew it wouldn't take long for the animals inside to get spooked. The threat came a few days later. A sleek black car pulled up beside me as I was walking back from the local market. The window rolled down, and Victor was sitting there. He was handsome in a cold, reptilian way, with expensive sunglasses and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Margaret Hawthorne, he said, his voice smooth as silk. I hear your son has been having some trouble. It would be a shame if his legal problems got any worse. Sometimes, it's best for everyone to just let sleeping dogs lie. It was a clear threat, delivered with the casual confidence of a man used to getting his way. A few months ago, it would have terrified me, but I had already faced the worst betrayal imaginable. This man was nothing. I leaned down toward the window, my own smile just as cold as his. You know, Victor, I said, my voice just as smooth. I've always found that the best way to deal with a rabid dog is to put it down. I turned and walked away, not looking back, feeling his shocked, angry eyes on me. The final trap was set. Working with the DA's office, we had Daniel agree to a recorded phone call with Claire. The goal was to get her to incriminate herself and Victor. Daniel, finally seeing a chance at redemption, played his part perfectly. He was panicked, desperate, telling her he was going to confess everything unless she helped him. Claire took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. Don't you dare, you idiot! She shrieked over the phone, her voice a venomous hiss, all pretense of the loving wife gone. You'll ruin everything. Victor and I had a plan. You were supposed to be the grieving son, not this pathetic mess. If you talk, you'll take us all down with you. What plan, Claire? Daniel asked, his voice trembling convincingly. The plan to destroy my business? The plan to take my mother's money? Of course, that plan! She screamed, completely unhinged. It was perfect, and you're going to ruin it. That was it. That was the confession. That was the final nail in her coffin. The end came swiftly. 2 days later, based on the recorded call and the evidence our investigator had gathered, the police moved in. I wasn't there to see it. I didn't need to be. Paul called me that evening. It's done, Margaret, he said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. They arrested Claire at her office. Victor was picked up at his golf club. Conspiracy, fraud, extortion. The list is long. They're not getting out of this one. I closed my eyes, a long, slow breath escaping my lips. It wasn't a breath of joy. It was a breath of finality. The war was over. The rage that had fueled me for months finally began to subside, leaving behind a quiet, empty space. I had won. But standing in the rubble of my family, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like justice. A year has passed. The seasons in Oregon have turned, painting the hills in the familiar shades of green, gold, and gray. The storm that ripped through my life has passed, leaving behind a quiet, altered landscape. The war is over. Now comes the difficult work of rebuilding. Claire and Victor received hefty prison sentences for conspiracy and fraud. Their names are now just echoes from a past I no longer visit. They are someone else's problem. Daniel, for his full cooperation with the district attorney, received a lighter sentence, 3 years of probation and mandatory community service. He is a free man, but he is not the same man. None of us are. People talk about forgiveness as if it's a switch you can flip, a magical absolution that erases all wrongs. It's not. Forgiveness, I've learned, is a messier, more complicated thing. It's not about forgetting. It's about choosing to stop letting the past poison the future. My relationship with Daniel is a testament to that. It's not what it was, and it never will be. The blind, unconditional love of a mother for her son has been replaced by something more cautious, more honest. The old foundation was rotten. We are now trying to build a new one, brick by painful brick. I didn't give him money. That was the first, hardest rule. Instead, I helped him find a small one-bedroom apartment across town. I co-signed the lease, a gesture of trust that he had to earn every single month. I helped him get a job, not in real estate, but at a local nursery, working with his hands in the soil. It's humbling work. It's honest work. It's what he needs. He calls me every Sunday. Our conversations are often awkward, filled with the things we don't say. He tells me about his work, about the new variety of lavender they got in. I tell him about my book club with Eleanor, about my yoga class. We are like two strangers learning a new language, searching for words that are safe, for topics that aren't landmines. There is no "do you remember when?" There is only "how was your week?" It's a start. Mending fences is slow work. My life is here now, at Green Valley. It's a life I chose, a life I control. My days are my own. But the true center of my universe, my North Star, remains Emma. Our bond, forged in the quiet moments in the garden, has become unbreakable. With the court granting me regular, unsupervised visitation, our time together is ours alone, free from the shadow of her parents' schemes. She is thriving. She is happy. And that, above all else, is my victory. Today is a beautiful Saturday. The sun is warm, a rare gift in the Oregon spring. Emma and I are in the small community garden behind my building, my own little patch of earth. In my hands, I hold a new rose bush, a peace rose, its roots bundled in burlap. "Where should we put it, Grandma?" Emma asks, her small hands covered in dirt, her face serious with the importance of the task. "Right here," I say, pointing to a spot where the morning sun hits just right. It needs a lot of light to grow strong. We dig together, our hands working in tandem. We place the rose bush in its new home, gently patting the soil around its base. It's a simple act, but it feels profound. We are planting something new. We are choosing to cultivate beauty in a place that was once barren. As we're watering the new plant, I feel a presence behind me. I turn. It's Daniel. He's standing at the edge of the garden path, about 20 feet away. He's not intruding, just watching. He looks tired from his week of physical labor, but there's a clarity in his eyes I haven't seen in years. The shame is still there, but it's no longer the dominant emotion. It's being replaced by something quieter, resolve. Emma sees him and waves. "Hi, Daddy." He gives her a small, sad smile and waves back. But he doesn't move closer. He knows this space, this moment, belongs to me and Emma. He understands the new boundaries. He is learning patience. He is learning respect. Our eyes meet across the garden. For a long moment, we just look at each other. There are no words that can bridge the chasm between us, not yet. The wounds are too deep, the scars too fresh. But in his gaze, I see a flicker of the boy I once raised. A boy who is finally, painfully trying to become a man. I don't smile. I don't wave. I simply give him a small, almost imperceptible nod. It's not forgiveness, not yet. It's not acceptance. It's an acknowledgement of his presence, of his effort, of the long, hard road that lies ahead for both of us. It's a signal that the door is not locked forever, but that he must find the strength to walk through it on his own. He nods back, a silent understanding passing between us. Then, he turns and walks away, leaving us to our garden. I turn back to the rose bush, my hand resting on Emma's small shoulder. The sun warms my face. The peace I feel isn't the easy, blissful peace of my old life. It's a different kind of peace. It's a peace that has been fought for, earned through fire and loss. It's the peace of a survivor. It's the peace of knowing you have saved yourself. And in the quiet afternoon light, that is more than enough. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment 1 below. If not, feel free to comment 0 so we know and can improve future videos. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.